and welcome to Let's Talk Diz, a show that gives you everything you need to know to help make your Disney vacation as magical as can be in just about 20 minutes. I'm your host, Jeff Goviella. With me each week is Disney Master Sandy from Easy Diz by Instant Impressions Travel Services. Sandy, how are you this week?
I am feeling very zen this week. The pressure is off of me.
Well, that's because we're talking about a topic that I believe maybe I have more experience with, maybe not more information on, but more experience with. Tonight we're talking about RunDisney.
And we are going to run it a little different because while I have participated in a RunDisney, and if you go back to episode 80, you'll hear my tale of woe. I have only done one race where Jeff has done many. I am definitely of the one and done caliber, unless anything drastic changes in my life. It was an unforgettable experience. I encourage everybody to try it once in your life if you can, but you won't find me back on the course regularly. And since Jeff has done so many, I thought I'd use his expertise tonight.
All right. Well, the floor is yours then. So just let's start with you, and then you ask away. We'll kind of go, and I'll try to give you as many answers as I can.
Awesome. So tonight we're going to really talk more about the races. As I said, if you want to go back to episode 80, I'll put a link in the show notes. It'll talk about what you need to prepare for the run and all the things you need to know, including that all of the live in-person races are timed races. If you don't keep an average of a 16-minute mile, they will close the course and throw you off. So this isn't, let me go out and just totally have fun and do this at whatever pace I want.
Right.
So why don't you talk about the different lengths of races and, quite frankly, some of these crazy challenges in my mind that I know many people, friends of mine, even participate in, where you kind of stack it all up in the weekend.
A lot of these RunDisney races are kind of structured along a weekend, and they all have their own unique challenges that occur during those particular weekends based on what they're doing. But I'll start with the marathon weekend, which is really kind of where it all began. And so you have a 5K, which is 3.1 miles, a 10K, which is 6.2 miles, obviously just double the 5K, a half marathon, which is 13.1 miles, and then a full marathon, which is 26.2 miles. So you would think that is enough for somebody to have over the course of that time. But then they get into things like the Goofy challenge, the Goofy, race and a half challenge, where you're doing the half marathon one day and the full marathon the next day. And then the Dopey challenge, which is the 5K, the 10K, the half marathon, the full marathon, where you're doing everything along that whole weekend. So realistically, depending upon where you are as a runner and as a lunatic, you can really sign up for as many of these races as you want, and they all have varying distances.
So I will give a shout out to my friend Amy, who falls in the lunatic category. I love you, Amy, but you're a lunatic. Amy runs pretty much every race that they have, and she is out there all weekend long with all of them so that she meets the challenge. And what I think is more incredible for Amy, not only the stamina that she has, but one of the really neat things about RunDisney that I love is, as a spectator, just to watch the costuming.
Yeah.
And Amy changes costumes for every race. I don't know how she does it. I've never seen her repeat a costume. So kudos to all of you who are both athletic and artsy so that you can pull off every bit of these weekends.
Well, and I think it maybe bears a little bit of explanation. So a RunDisney marathon, half marathon, 10K, 5K, whatever it ends up being what you do, it's not your traditional distance race, right? You're not going to your local 5K that occurs to raise money for a local cause and seeing anybody dressed up in the types of outfits that you're going to see on a Walt Disney World or even a Disneyland RunDisney race. People are dressed in full characters. My wife and I have done everything as very, very basic as Mickey and Figment, very, very elaborate as Genie and Abu, to rest in peace off kilter in one of the wine and dines that we've done. So you'll see people dressed in all sorts of really, really creative outfits.
I won't admit what I paid to have my turtle from the Electric Light Parade made.
Yeah.
I lit up. I had a great shell. I've brought the costume out when the parade actually returned in Disneyland, because for what I paid, to wear the outfit once was kind of sinful.
But I will say this too. You have to be mindful of the fact that depending upon what your race plan is for that particular event, you want to run in this thing. So as much as you want to look really cool, you also have to be aware of it being functional. I'll tell the story of the Wine and Dine. I had a kilt that I was running in that I had trained in North Jersey in, and then I got to Florida and it was way too hot. So like you just have to be aware of what it is that you're wearing as well. So it's all about having a good time, but you have to be functional.
And I will admit that's probably why I paid what I did for my costume, is I had a run costume designer make it.
Sure. Yeah.
So it was made from the right materials to be movable in, to be breathable, and for the temperatures that are expected that time of year. If only she had made it waterproof.
Well, I know we'll kind of segue a second there because you brought up temperature. I do want to mention that too, because my wife and I, we did run the Disney Full, which is in January. And the entire time we're preparing for it, people that have run it before, like you have to be prepared for cold weather, have to be prepared for cold weather. Well, we got there and it was 5 o'clock in the morning and it was 86 degrees with 95% humidity. And that's at 5 o'clock in the morning. So it was very far from cold. So you have to be prepared. It's Florida. They do get like 6 days of winter and it may fall during marathon weekend, but you also have to be prepared for heat. You have to be prepared for rain. You have to be prepared for lightning. They will cancel part of the race. They will cut some of the race short. They do modify based off of weather conditions. So you just have to be prepared for that as well.
And I think that's one of the things that I learned from runners and about racing, is that's the tough thing. If you're thinking you're going to run in hot weather and it is a little cooler, you don't want to have this great costume piece that's long sleeve, because I learned everybody just sheds it, throws it on the side of the race course, and you never see it again.
Definitely. So I will say the marathon weekend, it's a great weekend, right? But it's not the only running event that they have in Walt Disney World.
No, they actually now in Walt Disney World, 4 weekends a year are for running. So let's start with the one that you and I have in common, though I have not run it in its current condition, the Wine and Dine race.
So the Wine and Dine race is just as it's described. It lines up with the Food and Wine Festival in Epcot. Is really at the end of that festival, right? So you're kind of getting it right as that festival is starting to say goodbye. You get a chance to run through parts of the theme parks and things like that, and then you enjoy the rest of your day now, having had that experience, and get to walk around and eat and drink your way around the world, because it used to be at night. When you and I did it, it was at night, and now they've moved it to the morning.
One of the things that really inspired me is this isn't a regular race course through some neighborhood. You're running through the parks, through the castle, maybe stopping for a ride like our co-host here has done.
Yes.
And the goal is to make it the most incredible, memorable experience for all the runners, but not detract from the park goers.
Correct.
So it's that fine balance of when do you do this? And they found, honestly, that they had just gotten the routine so perfect with those ungodly early morning races that they switched that Wine and Dine that used to start at 10 o'clock at night to the morning.
I encourage anybody that's interested in any of these that we're talking about, whether it's the Disney Marathon weekend, whether it's Wine and Dine, we're going to talk about Princess, we're going to talk about Springtime, anything that occurs at Disneyland. They do publish these maps. So you have to understand that there's a lot of property that you're covering in some of these races. So to have the expectation that all you're doing is running through the parks, well, that's impossible, because you have to get from one park to the other. So just be mindful of the fact that you're going to be on the road for some of these as well.
And I will say, I obviously drive the roads at Walt Disney World all the time. And I used to think it was pretty flat till I ran the Wine and Dine. Things you don't notice in a car, you definitely notice as a runner.
Until you're on that incline or decline approaching Hollywood Studios on the marathon track, and then you're like, oh my gosh, what's going on?
It's really, I will say, the toughest part for me is, as Jeff said, you're running on the road, but that means you're running on the off and the on ramps to get you from one road to the other.
Yeah.
And some of those have a pretty steep pitch to them.
Well, that's the other thing. As somebody who trains at sea level like I do, you got to be aware of that it's different elevations. So just be aware of that. And you can find that information out too. There are all sorts of message boards that'll have the elevation and things like that, so you can try to train a little bit better for it.
And there is a lot of psychology and planning to it. I remember before I ran, if you are really interested in your time, which again, this is not a race where you get your personal best. That's not the goal of this race.
Right.
But depending whether you submitted a time and ended up in a very forward corral or a very back end corral, if you're near the back and it's not really your pace, you're much faster, you want to kind of move through the large corral of people. And there are places like the open roadway where it's super easy to pass because there's probably 20 to 25 runners across. But there are parts of these paths that are 2 runners wide, 3 runners wide. And if it rained like it did for me, maybe 1 runner because there's this massive puddle that you're trying to get the end of. So there is a little bit of planning to it, but I have to say, don't overwhelm yourself, run it and have fun.
Well, and I'll put it to you this way too. I'm married to a running coach, right? So we ran this marathon together. And Sandy, you're given the perspective of somebody that's there just to enjoy the experience. She's able to give it from a really professional running coach perspective too. And the big thing that really you don't know until you've gone through it is exactly what you just described, that there are tight parts of this course and all these courses that you just do not expect to be 2, 3, 1 person wide in certain spots. So just knowing that, I think going in is helpful because it helps create the expectation of what you're actually going to encounter.
So let's start where it all began. Can you tell us a little bit about what carries the name of Marathon Weekend? Because it was the original. It's always early January, typically the second weekend with registration, typically in April. So you'll see these races register months and months in advance, and the shorter races sell out incredibly fast, sometimes 20, 30 minutes. I think that's how people sometimes end up on those challenges because they are the last ones to sell out. But tell us more about the route and what makes Marathon Weekend special.
So Marathon Weekend is incredibly special, and I'll give a shout out too because you mentioned that they sell out. There are a number of really awesome charities attached to the Walt Disney World Marathon Weekend. They're attached to all major marathons, but specifically to the Disney World Marathon Weekend, that you can raise money for a great cause. My wife just signed up today. She's running this coming half marathon in January, running with Leukemia Lymphoma Society Team in Training. So whether it's that charity or any other charity, if you do not get in when you're registering, consider that as well if that's something that you want to do. But just the energy of Marathon Weekend is really, really incredible. I mean, I've been to the New York City Marathon. I haven't run it, but I've been there many, many times. I've been to Vegas, ran a marathon there. The atmosphere in the Walt Disney World Marathon Weekend is really, really unique in the sense that you've got Mickey Mouse and you've got a DJ and you've got just thousands of people in these corrals waiting to start their race. That is, the happiest mileage that they'll ever run. It's just really only thing I can say is it's a unique experience getting to run through the castle and getting to run through and jump on Expedition Everest, as I did, as you mentioned, during the marathon. There's just an energy to it that whether you're trying to get a time or whether you're trying to just take as many pictures as you can with whatever characters are along the course, there's really something for every type of person that wants to experience this. And notice I'm not saying every runner, right? Because there are plenty of people that are on this thing that are runners, that are hardcore runners. And then there are plenty of people that are just there because it's something.
I'm on mile 3 and they have finished.
Well, but listen, that's part of why these races exist, right? Is because Disney's understood that, hey, it's great for all of us to be moving. Number one, that's wonderful. But number two, not everybody's going to run a 9-minute mile. Nobody's going to run a 7-minute mile. Nobody's going to run an 11-minute mile, right? So to have an experience for somebody that's going to run that 14 to 15-minute mile, maybe have a couple miles that are faster, but get to experience all the awesomeness that is the Disney intellectual property along the way, there's a place for that. So
I think one of the things, if you haven't done something as massive as the New York City Marathon, which is in excess of 50,000. If you've only done local marathons, you're probably used to 200, 500, 1,000 people at the start line. Disney sells out, and that's 10, 12, 14,000, and that's why you get that spirit.
Yeah.
Originally, the Princess Marathon, which is usually mid-February, right around President's Weekend, with a late July registration, it's named Princess for the characters that are the icons of the race. But I remember a client calling me and saying, well, can my husband actually run this, or is it a girls only? So why don't you talk a little bit about Princess?
Well, because there are plenty of races across the country where that does exist, right? So it's not an insane question. You hear that and you wonder, oh, is this a female only race? It's not, right? It's just there's just so many intellectual properties that Disney has that they've gone and themed that particular weekend that way. So bunch of different choices as far as the length of what you can do, but the atmosphere is just as magical.
And then the last race, again, very spring heavy. They now have the Springtime Surprise, which began in 2022 because it replaced a race that you would run that used to be that weekend.
Expedition Everest, they had a whole themed race at the Animal Kingdom where you actually also had a scavenger hunt at the end. So when that went away, there was something what was going to go on in the spring, this and the other thing, and then they've kind of rolled this out. So each year we get a surprise themed race, as of 2022. So I don't know what they're doing this year. I think it's fun to kind of wait and see what exactly gets rolled out each year. They have not, I checked today, actually, in preparation for our show, they have not announced what it's going to be yet. And it's interesting because typically late August is when the registrations for those springtime surprise races come out. So we should be seeing them soon.
We're going to see that in the next couple of weeks. They like to hold that close to the chest till the announcement. And if date didn't matter, do you have a preference on course or a weekend that you think is a must-do more than another?
Well, I will say as far as I think that the timing for the Wine and Dine is just a great time to be in Walt Disney World. So I always recommend that the timing of that. The marathon is, you have to want to run the marathon if you're going to go for marathon weekend. And I think more than any other course, the marathon, you have to be prepared for certain parts of that course that are really, really tight. So if I was going to give a recommendation as to when you were going to go down there, having not done whatever the springtime surprise is now, I would choose Wine and Dine.
Now we're going to switch to the West Coast, which we know that's not your forte. And I will say I was scheduled to run a West Coast race, which I'll talk about more in a minute. There used to only be one, the Disneyland Half Marathon. That is late January. They've spaced them a little bit different this year. There are years where I know people get on a plane and leave Walt Disney World and head out to Disneyland and run right from one to the other. And this year they've added a new half marathon, the Halloween half, which is going to be September 5th to the 8th. That has a lot of small races. It's got a kids race. They break it down into heats of 0 to 1, 1 to 3 years old, 4 to 6, and 7 to 9. And they do a mini run through Cars Land. They do a 5K, a 10K, a 13.1. And then, Jeff, I was going to ask you about this new mystery number that I wasn't super familiar with. A 19.3.
Yeah, so they're combining the half, which is the 13.1, and then the 10K distance is the 6.2. So they're adding those together to get to the 19. This is one of those challenges, right? The Chills and Thrills challenge. It's 19.3 miles. It's basically you're signing up to run the 10K and then the half, right? So you're not going out on a course and running a 19-mile run. You're doing that over the course of the 2 days, getting yourself that challenge, that Chills and Thrills challenge medal, because over the course of the 2 days you've run that 19.3. So just want to make that clear for folks, because they don't have the economy of size that they have at Walt Disney World.
And again, it closes a lot of roadways. And in Walt Disney World, they can get away with that. They own the roads. In Disneyland, it's good for the economy, but traffic out in California, I don't care what day of the week, what time of the year, is always a mess. And so they've had to limit things a little bit more.
Yeah.
And we've talked about these races tonight and cost to register. Kids races tend to be a little bit less, more in the $40 range. But some of these, especially if you're doing multiple races, anywhere from $110 to $688. And that's your race charge. That's not, if you don't live there, your airfare, your hotel. If you're me, your time shopping and money in the expo. And so I think COVID brought a great thing for the run community when it comes to Run Disney. And for those that wish they were runners and are not, it brought on virtual races, which they've opted to continue to run, no pun intended, so that even if you can't get to the parks or you can't do a 5K in one day, you can be part of it. So tell us a little bit more about your experience with virtual races.
So the virtual race, as you said, kind of was birthed out of COVID, and there were a lot of major races that got canceled because they just couldn't do it. New York City Marathon being one of them. And so a friend of ours, a client of my wife's, ended up doing a virtual marathon because she was registered for New York. And so the concept of the virtual marathon, or virtual series, if you will, for Disney is exactly as it sounds. You sign up to run a 5K, and you could get the Mickey Mouse Bar 5K, depending upon where you run. You're running in your local neighborhood, you're running at a park, you're running somewhere else that you've done, and you submit that stuff to Disney, and you go ahead and you get the specific medal or the specific T-shirt or whatever it is that they're handing out. There are a number of different ones, just perusing what they've got now: the Mickey Mouse Waffle 5K, the Mickey Mouse Bar 5K, the Minnie Mouse Candy Apple 5K, the Pineapple Whip Soft Serve Challenge, because there's got to be a challenge with everything, right? If you do all of them.
And I'm guessing I'm going to go all out here, and Disney's not going to like what I have to say. I'm guessing Dole didn't pony up money to sponsor this race.
Yeah, it's not the Dole Whip Challenge, right?
Because I don't know why it's called the Pineapple Whip Soft Serve.
Sure.
Except that I'm thinking Dole didn't give them money.
Sometimes people don't have the ability to travel to the parks, but they still want to have that piece of Disney magic. Just let's look at the 5K registration cost for the Mickey Mouse Waffle 5K. It's $54, right? So you're getting a medal, you're getting a digital bib and a certificate. You're getting a digital race toolkit where you can print out mile markers and put them around on your own course. So you're not getting the same experience that you would if you were to travel to Walt Disney World or Disneyland and participate in one of these races. But like I said,
true.
There's something for everyone. Yeah.
Maybe you're not a runner. Maybe you're coming back from injury, and
Sure.
Maybe a 5K is just so impossible for you. But the nice thing about the virtual races, first of all, many of them do require that you submit with a Garmin or something else to prove you did it. Disney doesn't require that you prove it, but you could do your 5K over the course of 10 days if you want, and make it a tenth of a mile every day if that's where you're at.
Right.
And the nice thing is, if you want to spend the money, you can register children as young as 5. So it's a great way to get you and your child or children out and started in that healthier lifestyle.
100%. And I think in that vein, that leads us to the other one that you have, which is the virtual 12Ks of Christmas, right? So you've got a bunch of different days where you're going to go ahead and run, probably as a family, gather as a friend, and 3 virtual 4K races to get to the 12Ks of Christmas. So there's literally something for everybody.
I was going to say, as much as I said I'd never run again, that just sounds so adorable.
Well, and the medal's essentially an ornament. I mean, it's really, really cute.
I will note that all of the virtual races, because they are mailing you the medals, are open to U.S. residents and U.S. territories only. They cannot go internationally. Where all of the live races, you will find people from all over the world.
Definitely. Speaking many, many languages.
So the last thing that I'd love to talk about, again, this was in my failed race. I had actually registered for 3 races. Let's talk about silly, ambitious first-timer here who wasn't a runner. If you do the Walt Disney World and the Disneyland in the same year, and it used to be anyways, now they require that you do the Walt Disney World half marathon or marathon in January, or the Disneyland half marathon in January, and then any of the other halves from the opposite side of the country, you can get what's called a coast-to-coast challenge race. And so that has you doing 2 races together. You have to finish them both to get that last medal. And then one of the other things that's no longer offered, similar to how I talked about Disneyland and not having all of that space to be running all these big marathons, there for a very, very brief time was a Disneyland Paris Run Disney Marathon.
Yep.
And in addition to getting the Coast to Coast medal, you could get the Castle to Crown, which required the US half marathon and then the Disneyland Paris half marathon. So I think if you're a runner, there's so many great options for you. Not cheap, but a lot of great options with a lot of great memories. And if you're not a runner, but you're looking for that inspiration to get you exercising, with the exception of the kids' runs, these are not things you should spend all this money and walk out onto the course having not prepared for in any way. So they're a great way to get started. What else didn't we talk about tonight, Jeff?
Well, I would say, and I'll defer this to you because I know you are definitely the master as far as all things Disney Cruise Line. The one thing that my wife and I did do is that there's a 5K on Castaway Cay, which we were able to do, which was fun. I don't know if you had a chance to be a part of that course at all.
I have. There is a 5K on Castaway, as you mentioned. There is not currently one at Lighthouse Point. There was also another challenge that Disney had that they have not brought back, that was to do the January marathon in Walt Disney World and then hop right on the ship on the next sailing. I will say it is not anywhere near the feel of one of the races in the parks. But the nice thing about the Castaway 5K, it's free.
Yes.
It does require advanced registration, but advanced as of the day before on the ship. They've made it much easier. It's actually a free option in the app now. So that is a great thing. And as we were talking, of course, it dawned on me, that was called the Castaway Challenge when you did the park and the cruise together. But that also is not back officially, but obviously easy enough to make on your own, because barring the ship not docking at Castaway, that 5K happens on every cruise that visits the island.
No matter where you are on Disney property, whether it's the East Coast, the West Coast, or on the ship going to Castaway, there's an option for you. And I will say, just for my close, and then I'll let you kind of say your piece too, it's the type of thing where if you're listening to this show and you are a runner, I really encourage you to take a look at these course maps, take a look at what these races have to offer, because they are unique in many ways. And if you're not a runner and you're just a massive Disney fan and you want to get a little bit healthier, or you want to just experience something that is maybe outside of your comfort zone, there is not a quote unquote race on the planet that is a better place to do just that. So I encourage anybody that is interested in experiencing these to take that leap for the first time.
Excellent. Well, I'm going to run now. Have a great week.
Thanks, you too. That is a wrap this week on Let's Talk Dis. If anyone you know could benefit from this or any show, please share, have them like and subscribe. And don't forget to reach out to the folks at Easy Dis by Instant Impressions Travel Services for any Disney destination planning. Make it a great week. And as always, keep making memories.